I learned what my own burning flesh smelled like 3 seconds before my lungs collapsed. I sat there, frozen on the white marble by a paralytic poison, watching my adopted sister cradle my golden relic like a prize she had earned. I felt my fiancé's silver blade scrape against my ribcage, listened to him whisper excuses into my ear, and then I watched the world turn to orange ash. I didn't go to heaven. I didn't find peace. I sat in a pitch-black void for what felt like an eternity, marinating in a hatred so heavy it felt like lead in my throat, praying to whatever was listening for a set of teeth sharp enough to tear them both apart. Then I gasped for air and woke up in my own bed 12 months before the blade ever touched my chest. My name is Kira Henderson. In my previous life, I was the top student at the Blood Moon Academy, a sanctuary where elite witches and pure-blood vampires forged binding covenants. I spent 18 years memorizing ancient runic dialects and breaking bones on the cobblestone training grounds. I earned the right to step into the vault of relics first. I earned the Sun Seraph Heart, a translucent golden orb humming with holy light, capable of granting a vampire total immunity to the sun. But my adopted sister, Serenity Hicks, believed the world owed her a fortune simply for breathing. On the morning of my rebirth, I awoke to the soft tick of the brass clock on my nightstand. October 14th, 7 a.m., the morning of the selection, the day we were meant to enter the vault of relics for the first time, precisely 365 days before my execution. The bathroom door latch clicked, and Serenity stepped out, wrapped in a plush towel. She was humming a quiet tune, her skin fresh, and her eyes bright with artificial sweetness. "Oh, Kira, you're awake," she chirped, giving me a warm smile. "I could barely sleep. Today is the day. Master Caldwell said the vault contains items untouched for 300 years. Do you think you'll find a high-tier familiar?" A dark, heavy pulse throbbed behind my temples. My hands twitched with the urge to reach across the room, lock my fingers around her neck, and squeeze until her breath stopped. But I kept my palms flat against the wood of the dresser. My reflection showed my face settling into a cool, blank slab of marble. Ending her life now would be foolish. I would be locked in a dungeon by noon, and my second chance would end in an execution courtyard. No, she needed to lose her name, her comfort, and her mind first. "I'm sure we'll both walk out with exactly what we deserve, Serenity," I said, keeping my tone perfectly smooth. By early afternoon, we were standing in the damp reception hall of the Vault of Relics. Master Caldwell, a broad-shouldered instructor with a faded scar running across his mouth, stood in front of the iron doors. Behind me stood Riker Keller, heir to the Keller vampire lineage, my fiancé. He looked identical to the man who had left me to burn, tall, broad, carrying the calm arrogance of someone who had never been told no. "Nervous?" Riker murmured, leaning close enough for his coat to brush my shoulder. I slid a half-step sideways, putting space between us without looking back. "Just focused, Riker." Master Caldwell struck the butt of his iron staff against the floor, the sound ringing through the stone corridor. "The vault is open. Remember, you do not choose the artifact. The artifact responds to your blood. You have 1 hour." The iron doors ground open, revealing a long, shadowy hall filled with glowing pedestals. Students scattered like mice. I watched out of the corner of my eye as Serenity quietly matched my pace, trailing 2 steps behind. In my previous life, my heavy mana pool had naturally pulled me straight to the center of the hall, directly to the warm, sunlit aura of the sun's Serra heart. Serenity had followed, watching with sour, envious eyes while I claimed it. This time, I stopped 5 feet short of the velvet cushion where the golden orb sat pulsing like a miniature sun. Serenity let out a soft gasp, stepping alongside me. "Kira, look at it. It's breathtaking. I've never felt an energy so clean." She bit her lip, putting on her familiar helpless act. "I'm sure it wants you. You're the strongest one here." I turned to look at her, my eyes flat. "Honestly, it feels too bright for me. If you like it so much, Serenity, take it." Serenity froze, her eyes opened wide. She had spent weeks preparing quiet lies to steal it from me later, and here I was, stepping back and leaving the prize on an open table. Are you serious, Kira? This is a high-tier celestial artifact." "I'm sure. Go ahead." She didn't wait another second. Her hands darted out, grabbing the warm orb off the velvet. A flash of greedy satisfaction crossed her face before she quickly smoothed her expression into a timid smile. "Thank you, sister. I won't waste it." I turned my back and walked away. Let her take the bird. I knew a secret she hadn't learned yet. During those final seconds of my death, when my spirit had been pulled into the void, I had sensed something else buried beneath the academy floor, a low, suffocating pulse so old and dark that the bright light of the seraph felt like a cheap oil lamp beside it. I let my mind sink lower, looking for that same heavy frequency. I walked past the silver swords, past the glowing shields, heading into the unlit rear corner of the vault, where dust lay thick on the floor. There, wedged under the leg of an old wooden work table to keep it level, was a stone. It wasn't glowing, it had no beauty. It was a rough, soot-covered chunk of obsidian with a wide split down its spine. It looked like trash, but to my reborn senses, it was roaring. It pulled at my blood with a weight that made my molars ache. I knelt and picked it up. It was freezing cold, twice as heavy as iron. "Kira Henderson!" Master Caldwell's voice echoed down the hall. I turned to see him walking over, followed by Riker and Serenity. Caldwell looked annoyed. "What are you doing back here? That is foundational rubble from the original dig. It has no mana signature. You are wasting your selection on a rock." Riker shifted his weight, looking at the floor with an embarrassed frown. "Kira, stop playing games. Go back to the main room and pick a real weapon." Serenity held the golden glowing orb against her ribs, her eyes gleaming with quiet delight. "Kira, please don't throw your future away out of pride. I know you're disappointed I took the golden relic, but—" "I made my choice," I said, cutting through her fake tears. I walked past them to the central binding altar. "Master Caldwell, the Academy Charter states a student may bind with anything pulled from this room." Caldwell snorted, waving his hand in frustration. "Foolish girl. Fine, begin the blood mark." Serenity went first. She set her golden orb on the stone, pricked her thumb with a needle, and let a drop hit the shell. The room burst into a warm, golden radiance. A slender bird with feathers of white heat emerged, letting out a high singing cry. The instructors clapped. Riker looked at Serenity with a hungry smile that made my stomach turn. Then I stepped up. I set the dirty black rock onto the white stone surface. The room fell quiet, heavy with muffled smirks and quiet judgments. I didn't bother with a pin. I pulled the small utility knife from my belt, dragged the edge across my palm, and let a dark stream of blood pour over the split obsidian. For 3 long seconds, nothing happened. A boy in the back snickered under his breath. Master Caldwell sighed, reaching out to clear the altar. "A waste of talent, Miss Henderson. Step down." Then came the sound, a dull, heavy thud, like a crack in the foundation of the world. The snickering stopped instantly. The lamps along the walls began to flicker, their flames shrinking until the room was thrown into deep gray shadow. Serenity's golden firebird, which had been standing tall on the altar, let out a sharp, terrified squawk. It dropped its head, scrambled backward, and tried to wedge itself behind Serenity's skirts, its bright light sputtering out like a wet candle. Crack! A heavy, cold vapor began to spill from the fissure in the rock. It wasn't mana, it was old, dark, and starved. The temperature in the room dropped so fast that frost bloomed across the stone floor in long white needles. A voice resonated inside our bones, not through the air, but directly against the back of our teeth, like grinding stone and shifting earth. "Who disturbs Maddox from the sleep of eons?" The obsidian shattered into fine black powder. From the dust rose a towering shape of pure shadow, its form shifting like ink in water, leaving only 2 burning red eyes fixed entirely on me. The ancient sovereign of the void had returned, and as it looked at me, reading the bitter, endless hatred preserved in my soul, it didn't strike. The shadow dropped its head, bending forward in a quiet bow. I glanced over my shoulder. Serenity's face was chalk white, her legs shaking so hard she had to grab the altar to stay upright. Riker had backed against the far wall, his hands raised, breathing fast through his nose.
The silence in the vault of relics didn't break until Master Caldwell dismissed us with a curt wave of his hand, refusing to even record Maddox in the registry. As I walked out into the cold stone hallway, heavy boots hurried up behind me. Riker grabbed my forearm, his grip tight enough to leave a dark bruise. He pulled me into the shadow of a stone archway, away from the passing students. His face was flushed, his jaw tight with a mixture of fear and rage. "What was that, Kira?" he demanded, his voice a sharp whisper. "What kind of vile, unholy monstrosity did you just bind yourself to?" I looked down at his fingers on my arm, then back up into his eyes, perfectly calm. "I bound with the relic that answered my blood, Riker." "That wasn't a relic, that was a curse." He let go of me as if my skin had turned to fire, taking a step back and smoothing down his velvet coat. "The Keller family line is built on prestige and light. My father is in the gallery right now. Do you have any idea how it looks for the heir of Archduke Keller to be standing next to a witch who smells like sulfur and grave dirt?" "Is that what bothers you?" I asked, tilting my head. "The smell?" "Don't play dumb with me," he spat. His eyes darted toward the main hall where Serenity was already surrounded by admiring nobles, her golden firebird perched proudly on her wrist. "You look at your sister. She walked out with a high-tier celestial artifact. She has the holy mark. She has the backing of the High Council. You walked out with foundational trash and a nightmare." He squared his shoulders, putting on that cold, distant, aristocratic mask I knew too well.
I am dissolving our betrothal, Kira, effective immediately. I didn't blink. I simply watched him. Just like that? My father will not allow a void-bound outcast into our bloodline, Riker said, leaning in, his tone dripping with fake sympathy. It's just business, Kira. Serenity is the one with the future now. The Keller contract will be transferred to her by tonight. He turned on his heel and walked toward Serenity, offering her his arm with a soft, charming smile. I stood under the dark archway, watching my sister take his arm with a blush. I felt Maddox's cold presence coil around my heart like a protective shield, humming with dark amusement. They thought they had cast me aside. They didn't realize they had just tied themselves to a sinking ship. I let my lips curl into a slow smile. The real game had finally started. Over the next 3 months, leading up to the winter exhibition, the atmosphere in the Coven grew stale and bitter. Serenity's golden familiar had hatched, but it looked nothing like the magnificent beast from my previous life. Without my deep, unyielding mana pool to feed it during incubation, the creature emerged small and weak. Its feathers were dull, constantly dropping off like a sick hawk's. Worse, it was always hungry. I sat on the library balcony, watching Serenity try to display the bird to visiting nobles in the courtyard. Archduke Keller, Riker's ambitious father, stood watching with his arms crossed, his eyes narrow. "It seems sluggish, Serenity," the Archduke noted, his voice carrying up to the balcony. "Riker told me this familiar was meant to be extraordinary." "It is just adjusting to the season, Your Grace," Serenity lied, her voice tight. She smiled, but the purple skin under her eyes was thick, poorly covered by powder. Her blonde hair looked thin and dry. She was fading. Late one evening, I caught her in the alchemy greenhouse, frantically drinking bottles of illegal mana restoration tonic. She dropped a glass vial when I stepped around the wooden shelving. "Are you watching me, Kira?" she snapped, wiping a line of blue liquid from her chin with the back of her hand. "You look exhausted, Serenity," I said softly, leaning against the timber doorframe. "That bird isn't a pet, it's an ancient light eater. It requires a massive well of mana to stay anchored in this world. Your reserves were always shallow." "Shut your mouth," she hissed, her eyes wide with a frantic anger I had never seen before. "I am a Hicks. I have the golden familiar. I am marrying Riker, and I will take the Keller estate. You're just a freak holding hands with a shadow." "Riker?" I repeated, letting the name rest in the air. "Have you noticed how seldom he visits your quarters lately? How he always seems to have training whenever your bird starts screaming for food?" She didn't answer. Her jaw just worked silently in the dim green light of the greenhouse. The next afternoon, Riker cornered me near the quiet back shelves of the archivist's office. He stepped out from between 2 rows of dusty leather books, blocking my path to the exit. "Kira," he whispered, taking an eager step toward me, "we need to talk." I didn't halt my stride until I was a few paces away, stopping with my arms folded across my chest. "I don't think your bride would like you standing this close in an empty room, Riker." "Look at her, Kira," he snapped, his voice dropping into a harsh, agitated hush. "She's falling apart. Her skin looks like parchment. Her hair is coming out in clumps, and that gold bird of hers looks like a dying crow.
My father visited the grounds yesterday. He looked me in the eye and told me that if I marry a sickly, mana-drained invalid, he will strip my title and hand the Keller estate to my younger brother. He ran a hand through his hair, taking another step closer, his eyes locked onto mine with a cold, desperate hunger. She lied to us, Riker continued, putting on that tragic, solemn face he always used when he was setting someone up to bleed. She acted like she could handle the Seraph's power, but she's weak. She's a political liability, Kira. But you've tamed something that makes the Academy Masters sweat when you enter a room. Archduke Keller hasn't stopped asking about your shadow. We made a miscalculation. I made a miscalculation.
He reached out, his long fingers reaching to grab my shoulder. Let me handle the council. My father can officially break the betrothal contract with Serenity by Friday. We can pick up right where we left off. You were always the one with actual backbone. I looked down at his hand, watching the way his fingernails twitched with greedy impatience. I remembered the exact angle of his arm when he held the silver knife above my ribs. I remembered the single, fake tear he had dropped on my neck while he left me to burn. He didn't love Serenity, and he didn't love me. He was a tick, always dropping off one dying dog to crawl on to a healthier one. I didn't pull away. Instead, I let a thin thread of Maddox's cold weight spill out through my skin. The air around us turned thick and freezing. The shadows along the bookshelves stretched out, creeping over the floorboards like long, thin fingers that wrapped around Riker's boots. His breath hitched in his throat. The easy confidence drained from his face, leaving him pale and wide-eyed. "Put your hands on me again," I whispered, leaning close enough to feel the cold air coming off his skin, "and I will let him tear your mind apart inch by inch." Riker stumbled backward, hitting a low table and scrambling away toward the hallway without looking back.
The day of the winter exhibition arrived under a dark, icy sky. Thousands of spectators filled the stone tiers of the amphitheater, including Master Caldwell and Archduke Keller. The final match had been arranged by the Academy directors, of course. They wanted a show. Serenity Hicks, the girl with the golden bird, against Kira Henderson, the girl with the shadow. When we stepped onto the arena sand, the crowd made a low, roaring noise. Serenity looked like a ghost wrapped in silk. Her skin was gray, her fingers trembled, and her breathing was shallow as she summoned the golden bird. The creature appeared in a burst of weak light, let out a harsh, dry cry, and immediately turned its head towards Serenity, its beak snapping close to her face. It was starving. "Finish it, Serenity!" Riker shouted from the high balcony, though his voice lacked any real force. He needed a victory to salvage his family's investment. "Destroy her!" Serenity shrieked, pointing a trembling hand at me. The golden bird lunged forward, throwing a stream of pale fire across the sand. I didn't move. I didn't reach for a shield. I simply lifted my right palm. "Maddox," I said quietly, "take it." The dark mark coiled around my forearm detached, expanding upward into a wall of solid black shadow. The darkness didn't just stop the fire. It opened like a wide, hungry mouth and swallowed the heat whole, pulling the light out of the air until the arena fell into a dim, cold twilight. The audience went dead silent. Serenity collapsed onto her hands and knees, choking as the magical drain snapped back through her weak mana veins. "Is that all you brought?" My voice carrying clearly across the quiet sand. Serenity was sobbing, her hands pressed to her face. The golden bird, seeing its attack wiped out, turned around completely. It didn't look at me, it looked down at the girl who had claimed it. With a high screech, the bird drove its talons into Serenity's shoulders and jammed its beak straight into her chest, tearing into her manicore to feed on what little life she had left. "Help me!" Serenity screamed, reaching a blood-stained hand toward the high balcony. "Riker, please!" Riker stood up from his seat, his face white, but he didn't move toward the steps. He looked down at his father, the Archduke, who simply turned his head away in disgust. Riker slowly sank back into his chair, looking at the floor. Watching the holy bird devour its own owner, the true nature of my second chance finally settled into place. Maddox's cold voice echoed behind my ears. "A leech from the upper sky. It hides its hunger under gold feathers. In your past life, your mana was deep enough to feed the beast without killing you. By stealing your prize, she stole her own trap." Serenity hadn't taken a blessing. She had stolen her own executioner. In my previous life, my strength had been the only thing keeping the parasite docile. Suddenly, a figure dropped from the lower wall onto the arena floor. It was Riker. His face was twisted into a desperate, furious scowl. In his right hand, he held the ceremonial silver hunting knife, the same blade he had pushed into my chest a lifetime ago. With Serenity broken and his family's reputation ruined, he had decided the only way to save his standing was to kill the Shadow Master himself. He charged at me from my left, raising the blade toward my throat. "Die, you freak!" I didn't step back. I had waited 12 full months for this exact second. Before the silver point could come within 2 feet of my clothes, Maddox moved. A heavy whip of solid shadow struck out, hitting Riker's right arm with a loud snap. The silver knife flew into the dirt. Another strand of darkness wrapped around his neck, lifting his heavy frame 3 feet off the ground. Riker kicked wildly, his hands pulling uselessly at the shadow choking him, his face turning dark red. I walked over slowly, standing beneath him as he dangled in the air. "You told me this was business, Riker," I said, using the exact words he had spoken while I bled out on the marble floor. "You told me I would ruin everything." He made a wet, gagging sound, his eyes wide and bloodshot, begging me without words. "You were right," I whispered. I looked over at Serenity. The golden bird had vanished back into its stone, leaving her lying motionless on the sand. She was breathing, but her mana core was ruined forever. She would spend the rest of her days as a weak, hollow invalid, stripped of her pride, her power, and her mind. I turned back to Riker. "It will be quick," I promised, returning his old lie. I gave a slight nod. Maddox drove Riker down into the stone floor with crushing force. His body went instantly limp, his connection to his vampire bloodline shattered completely by the impact. I stood alone in the middle of the quiet arena, surrounded by the ruined bodies of the 2 people who had burned me alive. The heavy shadows gathered around my shoulders like a thick velvet cloak, soft and cold. They thought they had buried me in the ash. They didn't realize they had dropped a seed into the dark. Betrayal cuts deep, but vengeance,
Vengeance takes the whole harvest. Hit the subscribe button if you enjoyed this story. Thanks for watching.